36 Hazard Gnome. After leaving the deathly forest, Shi Feng's party rushed towards Dark Moon Valley without rest. At the current stage of the game, many players had already risen to level 2. Aside from raiding the dungeon at the deathly forest, they would stay in Brook Hills to kill level 2 cheetah cubs. Only a few experts would go to the level 4 area, Dark Moon Valley, to level up. However, along with the increase in player levels, it wouldn't be long before Dark Moon Valley would become occupied. After spending over half an hour returning to Dark Moon Valley, the scene they met with was the same as what Shi Feng expected. A few elite parties who were uninterested in the dungeon were currently killing level 4 kobolds that were wandering around the outer parts of the valley. These elite parties were quite skilled. They lured 2 or 3 monsters each time, with the shield warrior tanking in front and preventing the kobolds from closing in on their mage and healer. The healer was continuously healing from behind, barely maintaining the shield warrior's HP. Although it was taxing to grind in such a way, the gains from the fight were equally good. The 3 kobolds had dropped 2 coppers and some stone materials. In God's domain, only monsters level 3 and above would drop skill books and bronze equipment. Although the chance was only 10,000 to 1, it was still enough to cause players to go on wild goose chases. Currently, bronze equipment was very valuable, even more so were skill books. With these enticements here, there would be many experts who would come forth, even if there was some danger involved. After taking a few glances, Shi Feng turned and left towards the inner parts of the Dark Moon Valley. The other party members who were new to the Dark Moon Valley were very nervous. It was especially true when they saw the level 4 monsters scattered throughout the entire area. Their breaths became slightly hurried. However, Blackie was extremely calm when he saw these level 4 kobolds. After all, he had previously killed hundreds of them. He did not seem panicked, unlike the other party members. He simply followed Shi Feng, entering the deeper regions of the valley. As for the elite parties, they could not help but be shocked when they saw Shi Feng's party enter deep into the valley. They had never imagined the newcomer party would have such courage. There were very few players currently present in Dark Moon Valley. It had yet to be completely developed, so there were a lot of kobolds in the middle of the valley. The deeper one headed towards the center, the greater the number of kobolds. There would even be groups that consisted of 10 or more kobolds. Grinding monsters there was just too dangerous. The lowest number of kobolds they had to face was at least 4 or 5. It was not worth risking an unwarranted death. Unfortunately, these people did not know Shi Feng was more insane than they previously thought. Shi Feng did not just enter the deeper regions of the valley. Instead, he went towards the core of the Dark Moon Valley. There was a good location to grind monsters there. Not only was there a large number of monsters, but their respawn rate was quick as well. Most importantly, the drop rate there for ore was high. Regarding understanding, Shi Feng was like the local god of the area when it came to the Dark Moon Valley. Be it the location of the monsters, the number of monsters available, or their respawn time, Shi Feng had spent countless hours researching in his previous life. His goal at that time was to increase the grinding speed of his party, all to improve his position within Shadow. Life was truly fascinating. Shi Feng's sacrifice towards Shadow in his previous life had currently turned around to help himself instead. It could increase his own party's level more quickly, while at the same time guaranteeing him a steady supply of ore. Moving along the path of broken rocks, groups of 4 or 5 level 4 kobolds would occasionally appear. However, it was just a small matter with the equipment of Shi Feng's party. Looking at the party's guardian knight, Kola, be it with HP or defense, he could easily tank 4 kobolds at the same time. The healer, Drowsy Sloth, could maintain Kola's HP above 80% without wasting much effort. If Kola had let a monster past, then Lonely Snow would go up and push it back. As for the others, they would fervently deal damage. A simple sword strike from Shi Feng could already deal over 100 damage, whereas Blackie's dark arrows could each deal 88 damage. The fight could not get any easier than this. Within moments, the 5 kobolds were all dealt with. Compared to the elite party outside, Shi Feng's party was stronger by several folds. Shi Feng simply picked up the stone materials and ore that dropped, then continuing deeper into the Dark Moon Valley. After spending over an hour moving forward, Shi Feng's party had finally arrived in front of a mountain. The massive mountain was hundreds of meters in height. Kobolds no longer filled the area surrounding the mountain, wandering gnomes had replaced them. These wandering gnomes each held a small shovel in their hands, using it to dig into the rock wall of the mountain. There were also quite a few gnome overseers that inspected the surrounding areas with a whip in hand. Brother Feng, the monsters here are just too numerous. Are we really going to grind here? Blackie's heart shook slightly when he took a look around. He discovered hundreds of wandering gnomes around the vast mountain. There was even a few level 5 gnome overseers. Compared to the groups of over 10 kobolds outside, this place was a literal battlefield. Kola also gulped down a mouthful of saliva, worriedly saying, "Party leader, I'm not trying to boast, but tanking 6 or 7 of them is my limit. I really can't manage this many monsters." It wasn't just Blackie or Kola. The others, as well, were apprehensive. Wandering gnomes occupied the entire mountain, and these gnomes were very close to each other. As long as they made a mistake while luring, then they would have to face off against hundreds of level 4 monsters. Such a large number of monsters was much scarier than the Lord rank felt. I know you guys can't fend all of them off. However, whoever said about letting any of you tank hundreds of gnomes? Shi Feng rolled his eyes at his party members. He was extremely clear regarding the party's standards. Facing off against 10 gnomes at the same time was nearly their limit, so how could they deal with hundreds at the same time? Even a level 10 player would be finished when met with hundreds if level 4 monsters. However, wasn't there a good saying that stated, if you can't outfight them, outrun them? Shi Feng's agility had reached 30 points. Including the bronze shoes he had, his movement speed had exceeded the wandering gnomes by at least 4 points. He could easily kite the gnomes and let Blackie use the AoE skill, Hell Flame. The efficiency of grinding in such a way was several times greater than that of killing individually. Following which, Shi Feng told everyone about his plan. He needed Blackie to get the timing right, maximizing the effect of Hell Flame. As for the others, they were responsible for taking out the gnomes with low HP. When Shi Feng had chosen his position, he grabbed a handful of stones and rushed towards the nearby gnome overseer. Just as Shi Feng approached the 20-yard distance, the overseer had started yelling loudly. Its screams attracted the attention of many of the surrounding wandering gnomes. Shi Feng waited first for a moment, avoiding the whip of the gnome overseer and allowing the wandering gnomes to continuously gather. When about 30 gnomes had gathered, Shi Feng turned around and ran in the opposite direction. Afterward, he threw a small stone that struck another gnome overseer. The overseer who was struck loudly bellowed, bringing along over 20 of its brethren and rushing at Shi Feng. Within moments, Shi Feng had lured over 60 monsters. However, Shi Feng was not yet satisfied. He started circling the mountain as he lured monsters, and within 5 minutes, there were hundreds of wandering gnomes and more than 10 gnome overseers chasing behind him with all their might. Unfortunately for them, Shi Feng's equipment was just too good. His speed was 30% greater when compared to the gnomes. Including Shi Feng's extraordinary techniques and control over his body, he was able to toy with the gnomes whichever way he wanted. Blackie, get ready to cast, Shi Feng reminded. Alright. Blackie was extremely excited. This was his first time using AoE magic, so he did not know what kind of effects it would have. Subsequently, Blackie's fingers started gesturing in midair. Brilliant magical seals started appearing, forming into a dazzling magic circle that gave off a peerless aura. As Blackie spat out the last syllable, the land shook. Jade-green flames rushed to the sky, devouring the entire gnome army. A field of damages over 100 had appeared. Within 5 seconds, every gnome chasing after Shi Feng received over 200 damage, their remaining HP less than half. However, the target of these gnomes had also changed. They no longer went after Shi Feng, but Blackie instead. Shi Feng abruptly stopped. He pulled out the abyssal blade and rushed forward. Thundering Flash. Not only did the level 4 Thundering Flash have a low cooldown, but its attack range also increased to 15 by 3 yards. It had nearly covered the entire gnome army. 3 streaks of thunder flew past the gnome army, creating 3 damages of over 120 points to every gnome. The attack had completely devoured the remaining HP of the gnomes. As for the low HP ones that remained, they were quickly held back by Kola. Lonely Snow then rushed forward and used a whirlwind slash, thoroughly ending the remaining gnomes. The hundreds of gnomes had been wiped out, leaving behind a floor covered with items. Meanwhile, everyone's experience madly rose. EXP of over 10 points appeared one after the other, dazzling everyone's eyes. Wah! Blackie had risen to level 3. This is too awesome! Blackie roared in exhilaration. This is only the beginning. They will still respawn in a moment. Shi Feng laughed, let's quickly pick up the drops. Suddenly, everyone started busying themselves. Even with 6 people retrieving the drops, the loot of hundreds of gnomes still required them to spend a lot of time doing so. However, moments after they started collecting, a gnome that piloted a gigantic robot suddenly appeared. The gnome's face was crimson red. It immediately rushed towards Shi Feng's party with unparalleled rage. Not good. It's the hazard gnome. Everyone spread out. Shi Feng shouted the moment he laid eyes on the gigantic robot. 37 Rocket Boots. The moment everyone saw the giant robot piloted by a midget gnome, they instinctively knew he was something very dangerous. After hearing Shi Feng's reminder, they ignored the loot on the ground and immediately ran towards the forest without a shred of hesitation. Naturally, Shi Feng would not stay behind either. The hazard gnome was a very dangerous monster. It was especially true when he first made his appearance. He was even stronger than Werewolf felt with its Death Berserk activated. Hazard Gnome, Special Elite. Level 5. HP 1600/1600. There was a very small chance for the hazard gnome to appear after clearing out the wandering gnomes and gnome overseers. However, his appearance also signified the start of a player's nightmare. There was a saying in God's domain that warns people not to look down on gnomes just because they were midgets. If they were enraged, they could easily extinguish your life at any given moment. In his previous life, Shi Feng met the hazard gnome once before. At that time, he was with an elite party who was grinding for ore. After killing the gnomes, the hazard gnome appeared. They did not imagine they would meet a special elite, so they had all excitedly rushed at him. However, the situation ended up in a tragedy for the 20-man party. The hazard gnome's 1600 HP must not be taken lightly. His defense was an abnormality, capable of reducing 80% of the damage he received. A level 4 berserker using an axe could only take 2 HP from the gnome. On the other hand, the hazard gnome's attacks were even more powerful. Everyone would get a free trip back to the city after he fired a burst of bullets. Although Shi Feng's party had tried their best to run away, the hazard gnome's hatred for their evil deeds was clearly implacable. The rockets on the robot's back suddenly ignited. The steel machine that was over 3 meters tall rushed at high speed towards Shi Feng's party. While being chased, Blackie attacked with his dark arrow as he ran. Although the arrow had struck the hazard gnome, it had only caused a meager -4 damage. Blackie's eyes widened when he saw the damage. He said in a dumbstruck manner, "Disgusting. If the robot wasn't protecting this gnome, I could one-shot him anytime. Don't mind it for now and focus on running. Pay attention to dodging the bullets. As long as we are 1,200 yards away from the mountain, the hazard gnome will return." Shi Feng never thought, just after a lecture from him, Blackie's skill would improve to the degree of being able to hit his target while moving. However, fighting head-on with the hazard gnome would be very foolish. Blackie understood Shi Feng's intentions. He turned around and started chanting Evil Whip, binding the pursuing hazard gnome with 5 thorns and greatly reducing the gnome's speed. With this, everyone managed to gain quite a distance from the gnome. When the hazard gnome broke free from the 5 thorns, high damages of -23, -24, -23, -23, -24 suddenly appeared on his head. His HP had turned to 1,479 within an instant. The damage caused by the evil whip was just ridiculous. Blackie was shocked. Before, his level 3 dark arrow had only dealt -4 damage. On the other hand, the evil whip had caused over 100 damage total. The difference between them was just too great. Did the hazard gnome have that kind of fetish? Shi Feng saw hope when the hazard gnome's HP suddenly fell by a portion. The hazard gnome did not have any immunity towards plant-based attacks. Shi Feng immediately commanded, "Everybody stop running. Kola, get the hazard gnome's hatred and let his back face toward the group. The others attack and mind your positions. As long as the hazard gnome lifts up his gun, immediately dodge the muzzle. Blackie, attack immediately after Evil Whip's CD finishes. We have a chance to get rid of him." Whether they would live or die before they ran out of the 1200-yard mark was an uncertainty. So, why not fight it out? Who knows, they might even be able to get rid of this hazard gnome. In Shi Feng's previous life, there were no players who killed the hazard gnome before. If they were to kill him now, something good might drop. Currently, the hazard gnome's hatred was targeted towards Blackie. However, Lonely Snow was a step ahead of the gnome, using charge on him. He used a whirlwind slash on the gnome, causing 3 points of damage. Although the damage was low, the momentary fainted state it caused gave Kola a chance to use Divine Strike, followed by punishment. The 2 attacks caused -3, -2 damage, and the additional hatred they attracted had the hazard gnome locked onto Kola. The hazard gnome extended the electric saw on the robot's right arm, violently slashing at Kola. Kola blocked the attack with his shield, his body retreated 3 steps backward and a damage of -147 appearing above his head. Kola was shocked. When the next attack from the electric saw came, he hurriedly dodged and rolled to the side, avoiding the attack completely. Drowsy Sloth immediately healed Kola twice, returning close to 100 HP to Kola. Such fierce damage, Lonely Snow was shocked as well. He no longer dared to stay, turning around and running more than 10 yards away from the gnome. He would definitely die, even if he were only struck once by the electric saw. On the other hand, Shi Feng was not afraid of him. He immediately arrived at the hazard gnome's back, using out a series of skills, Thundering Flash, Double Chop, and Chop. The occasional critical hit would also cause -16 damage. Compared to the others, Shi Feng's damage was already very high. However, the hazard gnome only gave a look of contempt towards Shi Feng's attacks. He continued using his electric saw to attack Kola. A series of fierce attacks had forced Kola to constantly retreat backward, his HP was continuously falling as well. Behind, Drowsy Sloth's healing could not keep up with the damage Kola was receiving. He could only watch as Kola inched closer to death. At the most crucial moment, Shi Feng used Abyssal Bind. 9 pitch-black chains bound the hazard gnome, giving Kola a breather. Within the 3 seconds the hazard gnome had only lost 7% of his HP after being barraged by everyone's attacks. The total damage the party dealt was not even the equivalent of a single evil whip from Blackie. When the 3 seconds had ended, the hazard gnome regained his freedom. The green-skinned gnome revealed a mocking smile on his face, his tiny hands moving around and manipulating buttons. The robot's arm holding the electric saw made a roundabout slash, creating a beautiful arc. Shi Feng's entire person was sent flying. He smashed into a tree and lost 286 HP. Kola rushed up in a hurry, his HP having recovered by more than half. He used Divine Strike and Punishment once again, trying to pull back the hazard gnome's hatred. However, the hazard gnome had actually ignored Kola. Instead, he lifted the gun in his left hand, aimed it and fired a burst of bullets at Shi Feng. A barrage of densely packed bullets flew towards Shi Feng. However, Shi Feng had yet to land after being sent flying, so it was impossible to dodge the bullets. Phantom kill. Shi Feng's doppelganger instantly appeared before him. The doppelganger waved his blade, continuously blocking the bullets. Meanwhile, Shi Feng had already activated gravity liberation. He jumped up to a treetop, avoiding the attack range of the hazard gnome. However, his doppelganger had already been killed. After finishing a cartridge of bullets, the hazard gnome started changing magazines. Afterward, he continued to rush at Shi Feng. Everyone else could only continue attacking, shaving away the hazard gnome's HP bit by bit. However, Shi Feng was not easy to hit after he activated gravity liberation. Shi Feng also used the trees for protection. He was barely dodging the flying bullets as he continued kiting the gnome. As for Blackie, he would immediately use Evil Whip as soon as it was ready. The hazard gnome's HP continuously fell, 64%, 50%, 30%, 20%, 10%. When only 10% of the hazard gnome's HP remained, the gnome suddenly jumped out of the metallic machine. He wore a pair of rocket boots and started to escape. It can't be. Monsters can actually escape. Blackie watched as the hazard gnome ran, with extreme speed, to a location without people. The others were also shocked. They never imagined the gnome would have such a high intelligence. He ran the moment he knew he could not win the fight. We can't let him escape. We will have fought for nothing otherwise. Kola immediately chased after the gnome. He had been bullied by the hazard gnome just a moment ago, so his heart was currently filled with anger. How could he let the hazard gnome escape after having taken advantage of them? You want to escape? Not a chance. Shi Feng chased after him with wind blade. However, the hazard gnome was unperturbed. He sent Shi Feng a mocking expression before pressing a button on his waist. The rocket boots spewed out large amounts of flames, ready to fly away. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. TL notes. 1 within 3 seconds, the effective duration of Abyssal Bind. 38 Twin Snake Ring. The hazard gnome's shameless rocket boots shocked everyone. They had never seen a monster that was so good at escaping before. Its human-like expressions and actions were completely different from NPCs. The hazard gnome was like a person pretending to be an NPC. 2 streaks of crimson flame flared, slowly lifting the hazard gnome into the air. Unwillingness filled everyone's hearts. However, they could no longer stop it, but only watch the hazard gnome flee with their own eyes. The mages in the party were over 40 yards away from the hazard gnome. Lonely Snow as well was over 30 yards apart from it. It was not within the range of charge. Also, the faint effect of charge would become ineffective because the target was floating in midair. Only the movement speed increase would take effect. Currently, only Shi Feng was close to the hazard gnome. He was only 15 yards away from it. However, Shi Feng did not have any range attacks. Even if he chased after it, the hazard gnome would raise over 20 yards from the ground by the time he arrived. In the end, Shi Feng would only watch the hazard gnome escape. 9 Dragon Slash. Shi Feng knew he could not catch up. He waved the abyssal blade, shrouded in black mist, in his hand. Within an instant, 9 streaks of black mist shot towards the hazard gnome. Shi Feng was not willing to allow such a smart hazard gnome leave. Initially, Shi Feng only thought of the hazard gnome as an average special elite. He had never imagined the gnome to be so much like a player. Throughout his 10 years of playing God's Domain, Shi Feng rarely saw such intelligent gnomes. The main god system wouldn't simply bestow a small monster with high intelligence. Such bestowals usually had a deeper meaning behind them. For example, those human heroes or legendary beings were all great characters. Their existences caused people to shudder. Although the intelligence of this hazard gnome did not reach the level of those heroes or legendary beings, he was still much smarter than a boss monster. There might even be unimaginable gains by killing it. Currently, the hazard gnome's displayed information changed. He suddenly became Arcus Maddox. Arcus Maddox, Lord Rank. Level 5. HP 600/600. Shi Feng felt a sense of familiarity when he saw this name. It seems that he had heard of it before, yet he could not recall anything about it. However, the gnome only had 600 HP. Shi Feng was confident he could kill the gnome with the 9 dragon slash. Just when the 9 sword shadows were about to pierce Arcus Maddox, the gnome took out a few steel balls from his small bag. He threw the balls at the phantoms of the abyssal blade. Brilliant sparks flared up the moment the two attacks came into contact. Hong! 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 A series of explosions forced the phantoms of the abyssal blade back. Just when the phantoms were prepared to attack Arcus Maddox once more, he immediately flew over 30 yards away. Meanwhile, the 9 phantoms of the abyssal blade could only attack targets within 30 yards of its reach. Shi Feng could only watch helplessly as Arcus Maddox escaped. Crap! How could there be such a monster? His escaping ability is just a bug one. Blackie stared at the fleeing Arcus Maddox as he cursed. Kola was grinding his teeth in hatred as well, sending a few punches towards a nearby tree. The other party members felt displeasure also. Everyone fought long and hard against this elite monster. However, just when they were about to reap the rewards of their efforts, their prize grew wings and flew away. Was there anything more depressing? Brother Feng, let's continue chasing it. Blackie discovered that the gnome's movement speed was not fast. Also, there should be a limited amount of fuel powering that pair of boots. Who knows, the gnome might land just after a while. Forget it. Let's continue grinding gnomes. Shi Feng shook his head. If they could chase the gnome, Shi Feng would have long since chased after it. However, the gnome's rocket boots were just too powerful. It was titled as one of God's domain's godly escape tools. Currently, the boots had just been activated. Its speed would abruptly increase in a moment, and the gnome would disappear in the blink of an eye. It would be an impossible task if they wished to find the gnome. As expected, the flames gushing out from the rocket boots greatly increased after a moment. Shoo! Arcus Maddox disappeared from the air, unable to be seen anymore. Best not let us meet again. You can dream of escaping the next time. Blackie said in an unfortunate tone as he looked towards the spot where Arcus Maddox had disappeared. In his heart, Shi Feng felt that it was a pity to let the gnome go. However, it would no longer be dangerous when they grinned on wandering gnomes from now on. After this experience, the hazard gnome most likely would not show himself ever again. Let's go, continue grinding on the wandering gnomes. Shi Feng turned around and said to his party. Brother Feng, you're still the best. How could I not think of it? If we killed all of this bastard's kinsmen, we'll see if he doesn't show up again. Blackie laughingly said. Shi Feng was speechless. He turned around and left, no longer paying any attention to the fantasizing Blackie. Suddenly, Shi Feng stopped his feet in shock. Damn, our luck really is too poor. I never thought that Arcus Maddox would actually appear here, and he was also a level 5 hazard gnome. Shi Feng tightly clenched his fists, his brows wrinkled. It was the first time he became so enraged. When everyone looked at Shi Feng's wrathful expression, they could faintly feel the surroundings become chilly. They could not help but retreat a step, their foreheads covered in a cold sweat. Before, they felt Shi Feng was a calm and easygoing person. Never would they have imagined Shi Feng would become so terrifying after becoming angry. The forest around them no longer seemed lively but more like a frozen hell, silent, cold, and dark. Brother Feng. Are you all right? Blackie carefully asked. He was shocked. Shi Feng was completely different from when he was mad or arguing with others. It was the first time Blackie saw Shi Feng enraged to such a degree. Oh, it's nothing. Shi Feng reacted, replying with a smile. He stored back the dense killing intent into his heart. Such killing intent was slowly honed throughout the years Shi Feng had played God's domain. Compared to the tyrant bear Kola of 10 years in the future, there was nothing special about Shi Feng's killing intent. However, at present, it was considered unbearable for Blackie and the others. Shi Feng finally recalled the name of Arcus Maddox. Arcus Maddox was a famous Grandmaster engineer within God's domain. 3 years after Arcus Maddox shocked the nation by creating the Sky Fortress, Twin Snake Ring, he had gone on to establish the Gnome Empire. With it, the new update Emergence of the New World also activated. At that time, countless super guilds started expeditions towards the fortress, Twin Snake Ring. However, all of them were annihilated, and Arcus Maddox was the cause of such a result. On the other hand, Shi Feng was completely unaware of a great character had appeared right before his eyes. He also lost the chance to kill Arcus Maddox, so how could Shi Feng not be enraged? Party leader, there's a box here. Did it drop from Arcus Maddox during the explosions? Gluttonous Mouse, who had been silent all this while, asked as he picked up a small metallic box from the grass. Shi Feng received the box and took a look at it. He discovered the words Arcus Maddox carved onto the metallic box. Shortly after Shi Feng opened the box, he said suddenly with a laugh, Great. Good job, Mouse. With this, we didn't fight for nothing after all. When the group saw Shi Feng in a happy mood, they knew the item must be very precious, as common items were nothing in Shi Feng's eyes. As to wanting the item for themselves, none of them ever had such thoughts. They had long since made Shi Feng their idol, and being able to aid their idol naturally made them happy. Let's do it this way. You guys stay here to grind and level up. I still have something that needs to be done. Notify me when you have all reached level 4. Shi Feng kept the metallic box and hastily made the arrangements. Nobody could help him with the following matter. Only Shi Feng was able to proceed. Everyone felt reluctant when they heard Shi Feng's command. However, hearing Shi Feng have plans for them after they reached level 4, their anticipation grew as they abided Shi Feng's arrangements. Subsequently, Shi Feng left the deeper regions of the Dark Moon Valley. The party had Blackie's AoE skill. Killing 7 or 8 gnomes at a time was no problem at all, and their leveling speed was at least 2 or 3 times faster than the other parties. On the other hand, what Shi Feng needed to do was to utilize this metallic box, and to forward the first step of his plans in God's domain. *****. TL notes. 1 bug, a fault in the game that causes unexpected results when an action is carried out within the game. 39 Philosopher's Stone. After leaving the Dark Moon Valley, Shi Feng rushed towards Scarlet Lake. He had also activated gravity liberation to save more time. The players on their way to the Dark Moon Valley saw Shi Feng speeding past them like a gale of wind. His speed was shockingly fast, and his figure was just a blur. Who is that person? Which assassin is he? His speed is so fast. No, look at his waist. That's a sword hanging there, not a dagger. He should be a swordsman. Crap. Are the current swordsmen that OP? The widely spread rumor on the forums stated that a mysterious swordsman killed the mayor of Red Leaf Town. There was also a powerful swordsman at the Deathly Forest that received an invitation from the Snow Goddess. I would have played as a swordsman if I had known about this earlier. Say, do you think they're the same person? Definitely not. I saw the swordsman that killed the mayor. That male swordsman was as big as a black bear. His arms alone were thicker than our thighs. He had forcefully killed that level 15 mayor. The players passing by started a discussion as they watched Shi Feng depart. They were inwardly speechless towards the swordsman job. They should have played as swordsman if there was such a powerful job. However, it was too late now. Shi Feng might have laughed it off if he had known their thoughts. There was no strongest job in God's domain, only the strongest player. Shi Feng ran for over 2 hours through the vast plains. He activated gravity liberation over tens of times, escaping the pursuit of high-leveled monsters. He passed through the level 6 map, Wolfman's Ruins, and the level 8 map, Oro Fort, before arriving in the level 10 area, Scarlet Lake. Scarlet Lake was the playground of level 10 water elementals and little fishmen. Watching from a high location, Shi Feng could see groups of little fishmen patrolling. The closer it was to the Scarlet Lake, the more there were of little fishmen. The central region of the Scarlet Lake was the nest of the little fishmen, whereas annoying water elementals filled the water of the lake. Due to the densely packed and large number of monsters in the Scarlet Lake, the little fishman's curse skill was extremely horrendous. It could absorb a player's attributes and turned it into their own. The longer they fought, the stronger they would become. They were extremely hard to kill. Including the fact that there were no quests here, there were rarely any players who would willingly come here to level up. However, Shi Feng had to enter into the deeper regions of the Scarlet Lake. The metal box dropped by Arcus Maddox was extremely precious. If Arcus Maddox were to know it fell into Shi Feng's hands, he would most likely bleed out in rage. There was a treasure map inside the box, and the treasure it hid was located at Scarlet Lake. Shi Feng had played God's Domain for over 10 years now. He had done extensive research regarding the history of God's Domain. He truly did not think Arcus Maddox would have this treasure map. It was the record of a heaven-shaking secret. 900 years ago, Alchemy Master Molotov had created an item with all his effort. Wars were waged between the large countries in God's domain for this item. There were over 10 heroic figures that fought over it. However, this item became lost in the end, its whereabouts unknown. It had become an unsolved mystery in God's domain. Meanwhile, the treasure map in Shi Feng's hands, by chance, recorded the location of this item. This item was the Philosopher's Stone. It was a sacred item for alchemy. If alchemists could obtain the Philosopher's Stone, then they would have the ability to transform stone into gold, amassing immense wealth. They would even be able to revive the dead, breaking the alchemy law of equivalent exchange. Who would have thought such a sacred item would be placed in such an unremarkable location as Scarlet Lake? However, the Scarlet Lake was still a dangerous place for Shi Feng. After all was said, there was still a gap of 8 levels between Shi Feng and the monsters here. With the suppression due to levels, Shi Feng was not an opponent for the level 10 monsters, not to mention the attribute-stealing little fishmen. However, Shi Feng could not help but take the risk. The earlier he obtained the Philosopher's Stone, the earlier his heart could be at ease. If he waited until he was level 7 or 8, someone else might claim the item. He wouldn't even be able to feel regret when that time came. Shi Feng took out the metal box from his bag, carefully taking out the treasure map within it. He started researching it in detail. The marking on the treasure map was very clear. The treasure was located directly below the little fishman's nest. However, how would Shi Feng be able to circle around all these little fishmen? The problem with the water elementals also needed to be solved. Although water elementals had low HP, they had a 60% immunity to physical attacks. They also had a movement speed reduction skill, so they were a headache for melee players. After observing for half an hour, Shi Feng discovered that the little fishmen were not always on patrol. They would eventually take a break. Also, these little fishmen were only active by the lake's shores. They hardly ever entered the water, because once they entered it, their movement speed would sharply reduce by 60%. Shi Feng could use this short rest period to rush into the lake, and once he was in it, the little fishmen would not be able to chase after him. As for the water elementals under the water, Shi Feng could use the doppelganger of Phantom Kill to lure them away. Then, he could swim to the cavern below the little fishman's nest. If Shi Feng did not operate through his plan properly, he would definitely die. If he died, his losses would not be minor. It was not the experience loss that was a problem, however. With his advantage as a reincarnated person, Shi Feng could quickly recuperate the experience he lost. Only, he would be sent back to the town after dying once, and the time he would waste by returning here was just too much. 10 more seconds. Shi Feng watched the patrolling little fishman, his heart estimating the time for him to sprint out. Time passed second after second. A group of patrolling fishmen watched their surroundings. After discovering nothing out of the ordinary, they entered a small wooden hut by the lake to rest, emptying the land by the lake. With all his might, Shi Feng dashed towards the shore. When Shi Feng was about 30 yards away from the lake, another group of patrolling fishmen discovered Shi Feng. They immediately sounded out an alarm, their hands wielding short swords as they rushed toward Shi Feng. When faced with 4 level 10 little fishmen, as powerful as Shi Feng was, he was not their match. Shi Feng's only hope was to jump into the water. However, the little fishmen were very quick, taking only a short moment to catch up to Shi Feng. They waved their short swords, slashing them at Shi Feng's back. Shi Feng knew he could not outrun the fishmen. He turned around and used Abyssal Bind on one of them, then continued by using parry to block another one of his attackers. As a result, Shi Feng stopped the other little fishmen from moving forward. Using the power behind the fishman's attack, Shi Feng managed to pull away a distance of over 3 yards. He activated gravity liberation and then jumped onto the lake. However, the other little fishmen were quick to catch up, jumping into the lake after Shi Feng as well. Plop! 4 little fishmen fell into the water. Shi Feng, however, was madly running above the lake's surface. Walking on water was a skill that could only be activated after agility reached 80 points. However, Shi Feng had the ring of gravity. As a result, his body had reached a state of near weightlessness after activating gravity liberation. Including his agility that was over 30 points, he, too, could move on the water's surface. His speed would not be reduced by the water. In a few moments, Shi Feng had shaken off the unyielding little fishman. He ran to a location not far from the little fishman's nest, diving into the water. Just after entering the water, Shi Feng discovered a cavern that was surrounded by a lot of water elementals. The water elementals were encircling around the cavern as if they were protecting something. Water Elemental, Common Monster. Level 10. HP 750/750. Shi Feng used Phantom Kill. His doppelganger swam over, luring the water elementals. Just as Shi Feng planned, a group of water elementals had discovered the doppelganger. One after another, they chased after the doppelganger. Meanwhile, the doppelganger swam upwards. Although the water elementals had high movement speed underwater, it was an entirely different story when they were above ground. They were the opposite of the little fishmen, becoming extremely slow once they reached the shore. With the water elementals lured away by his doppelganger, Shi Feng took the chance to quickly swim towards the cavern. Before Shi Feng even reached the cavern, the system notified him of the death of his doppelganger. The doppelganger had only earned Shi Feng over 20 seconds. After killing the doppelganger, the water elementals discovered an intruder near the cavern. They all hurriedly swam back to the cavern entrance. After discovering Shi Feng, the speed of these water elementals increased by a fold as they sped towards Shi Feng. 40 Sun Temple. Above the scarlet-colored lake, the speeding water elementals created waves of water that struck at the little fishman's nest. Waves that were as tall as a person enveloped the entire nest, destroying many of the small wooden huts on it. The hundreds of little fishmen inside the nest entered a frenzy. They screamed and bellowed, each of them holding weapons as they jumped into the water and swam towards the cavern below the nest. Dual-layered protection. Shi Feng took a look behind him, shocked. As if hundreds of water elementals were not enough, now there were also hundreds of little fishmen following behind. With this amount, even 2 or 3 elite groups of players would not amount to anything. Shi Feng had no choice but to increase his speed and rush into the cave. There was still a thread of hope for survival. However, Shi Feng's speed underwater was very slow. It was incomparable to the druids who had their seal transformation, where their movement speed was increased by 50% when moving underwater. Instead, Shi Feng's movement speed was reduced by 50%. Soon, Shi Feng was just 50 yards away from the cavern's entrance. However, the enraged water elementals approached Shi Feng as if they were flying, their distance between Shi Feng shortening quickly. 42 yards. 28 yards. 20 yards. 10 yards. Just when Shi Feng was only 5 yards away from the cavern entrance, the water elementals had caught up with Shi Feng. They waved their gigantic icy fists towards Shi Feng's head. The attacks from water elementals carried a freezing effect that reduced movement speed. As long as they hit Shi Feng, the water elementals would cling to him till death. Shi Feng hurriedly spun around and used parry, blocking the fist of the first water elemental. Using the water elemental's immense strength, Shi Feng's body retreated backward by quite a distance. However, the remaining water elementals also rushed at him. It seems I'll be going back to town. Shi Feng looked at the hundreds of water elementals in front of him, feeling powerless. Just when Shi Feng was about to give up, he had floated into the cavern. Inside, he saw a human-shaped ghost roaming about. It was roughly 30 yards away from Shi Feng. Shi Feng gave caution to the wind. If he had to die, then he would die trying. At the very least, he could obtain a little more information for future preparations. Hence, Shi Feng used Wind Blade, his speed increasing by a large leap. Like a gale, Shi Feng swept through the water and rushed to the shore of the cavern, escaping the clutches of the water elementals just in the nick of time. The moment the water elementals left the water, their speed was sharply reduced. They could not catch up to Shi Feng's mad dash at all. After leaving the water, Shi Feng quickly rushed towards the human-shaped ghost. The moment the abyssal blade was about to slash across the ghost's neck, Shi Feng suddenly discovered the half-transparent ghost did not actively attack him. Shi Feng abruptly turned the tip of his sword away, the blade sliding past the ghost's side. It did not attract the ghost's hatred. Close 1, Shi Feng felt cold sweat down his back when he looked at the ghost's information. Brave 1, Floyd. High Lord. Level 25. HP 360,000/360,000. If Shi Feng had attacked this brave one and attracted his hatred, even if he had 100 lives, he would still end up dead. Within God's domain, brave ones were only second to heroes regarding strength. Their position within a kingdom was even higher than that of a marquis and was second only to a duke. Even if such a great character had died and turned into a ghost, he was still a monster of the great lord rank. He was a tyrant amongst monsters. Without 100-men group of elite players, it was impossible to kill off this ghost. Could he be the guardian of this place? Shi Feng looked at the brave one, Floyd, silently guessing in his heart. There were usually guards posted around places with treasure. As for the little fishmen and water elementals outside, they could be considered, at most, as guard dogs. They were unfit to guard an important treasure. Shi Feng did not dare to stay any longer. After all, there was still a large group of monsters chasing after him. He hurriedly ran towards the inner regions of the cavern. The cavern was very large. There was a flight of stairs that led straight into the depths of the cavern, and following it down ought to lead Shi Feng to the Philosopher's Stone. When Shi Feng was right before the stairs, a sea of water elementals and little fishmen had rushed at him. It was as if they had an undying grudge against him. You lower life forms dare to sully this divine place? Prepare to receive divine punishment. Floyd's gaze suddenly erupted in rage, pulling out a dark golden great sword from his back. The sword gave out a surge of evil that made it seem as if it were the master of the world. When Floyd raised the great sword, the surrounding air started becoming heavy. Following which, Floyd gave out a loud bellow as his arms swung the great sword with all their might. A strong wind, followed by a sword flash, swept through all the water elementals and little fishmen. Each and every one of the monsters turned into ash, and the cavern's entrance instantly transformed into a pile of rubble. Strong! Shi Feng exclaimed in shock. He had sorely underestimated the strength of a brave one. Floyd's single sword could easily wipe out a 100-men group of level 30 elite players. A 300-men group might be needed to even have a fighting chance. It was unexpected that the water elementals and little fishmen did not even have the right to become guard dogs. They were all annihilated in an instant. Shi Feng wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Luckily, he was a human and not a lower life form. Otherwise, his outcome would be similar to those water elementals and little fishmen. This place is truly vicious. I guess I can only go downward now. Shi Feng looked at the collapsed entrance. Not even an earthworm could find a way through the debris. The stairs that led down were spiral-shaped. The rocky walls surrounding it were also enchanted with a kind of light-based magic, brightening the entire stairwell. However, this stairwell was extremely long. Fortunately, there were no dangers here. After walking for an entire half an hour, Xi Feng finally arrived at the end of the stairwell, at the beginning of a wide and spacious hall. The hall was about the size of an entire football field, and it looked similar to a shrine of sorts. Made out of gold and jade, the two sides of the hall were carved with an abundance of illustrations and texts. There was also an altar at the deepest part of the shrine. Above the altar was a treasure chest made of pure gold. On each side of the treasure chest, there were two statues made of gold, both of them holding a great sword in their hands. System: player has discovered the Sun Temple. Sun Temple. It was the first time Xi Feng had heard this name. In his previous life, there was no information on the Sun Temple. It might have been because no player had activated it before, so there was no information about it on the official website. However, looking at the situation, it should be very dangerous. However, Xi Feng couldn't care less about it as he walked towards the golden altar. His target was the Philosopher's Stone, and the golden chest before his eyes should be holding the item. The moment Xi Feng stepped onto the altar, he clearly felt a chill permeating his body. The chilliness came from the two gigantic golden statues. Xi Feng did not know what sort of consequences there would be if he continued onwards to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone. However, he no longer had any choice. The cavern's entrance had already been sealed off, so he could only decide after grabbing the Philosopher's Stone. Xi Feng slowly opened the golden treasure chest. Golden rays of light leaked out from the chest, illuminating the entire temple. Subsequently, the golden rays started to fade, revealing 3 items inside the chest. Xi Feng pocketed the items with zero hesitation. Crap, how could the Philosopher's Stone end up in such a state? Xi Feng looked at the thumb-sized blood-red stone, feeling extremely disappointed. Philosopher's Stone, damaged. Epic rank special item, dropped after death. A sacred item for alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone can be used to turn stone into gold, revive the dead, and has many more unfathomable uses. However, the Philosopher's Stone was damaged and broken into 5 pieces by the Sword Emperor, Schneider. Nevertheless, the Philosopher's Stone possesses immense strength. As long as the 5 pieces are gathered, it will be able to recover all of its strength. Active effect: due to being damaged, the Philosopher's Stone possesses less than a tenth of its original strength. It is only possible to use it for alchemy conversion and elemental refinement. Although the effects were greatly reduced, Xi Feng was still satisfied with it. These 2 abilities would enable Xi Feng to accomplish a lot. As for the remaining 2 items, one of them was the Golden Greatsword, a level 10 fine gold weapon. The other item was an instantaneous movement magic scroll. A great treasure indeed. Xi Feng looked at the Golden Greatsword in his hands with extreme excitement. Aside from magic weapons, it was the best item a level 10 player could have. If a level 10 player were to equip this greatsword, they could definitely become invincible amongst players of the same level. At this moment the 2 statues by the side shook. Their eyes released a red glow, locking their sights on Xi Feng. Xi Feng used the instantaneous movement magic scroll without hesitation. Golden-colored magical seals suddenly wrapped around Xi Feng. The spell on the magic scroll had a cast time of 3 seconds, and it was capable of sending the player to a selected location. This magic scroll was extremely precious. Although there were only a few copies of it in the entire God's domain, dying in this place was a much greater loss to Xi Feng. Just as Xi Feng was about to be slashed by the golden statues, he vanished from the temple.